Hey ProGuides fam, how's it going? My name is Crumbs and I'll be your host for our Korean builds video. In it, we'll cover the latest trending builds on patch 12.11, everything from new optimizations players have made to builds players have cracked to tackle specific matchups here. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content like this. So let's get started. As usual, let's open up our video talking about top laners. A ton of players would agree that Gwen is a dominant force right now, ending the last patch with around a 49% win rate in high elo. She's performing much better than in the recent past. Although that might not sound rather impressive, I will note that in Masters Plus, she's above 50% and in Challenger, above 51%. Typically, with how powerful a kit she has, champions like Gwen sit below 50% when balanced, as they'll be incredibly strong in the hands of great players. And that's the situation we're in right now, where competitive and elite players are really abusing her. That said, here's a rundown of a build that's seeing more and more use. For her runes, the running Standard Conqueror, Presence of Mind, Alacrity, Last Stand, Second Wind, Unflinching, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and a defensive rune. Here's where it gets spicy. For your items, you'll want to build Nashor's Tooth, Defensive Boots, Divine Sunderer, Zhonya's Hourglass, Cosmic Drive, and Rabadon's Death Cap. Taking Divine Sunderer gives a ton of durability and also provides some well-needed magic penetration. Considering the durability buffs, more HP on Gwen is even more effective than before, while the penetration you gain from the Mythic passive is far more valuable. Next on the list, we have a build for Shyvana top. She's made a recent comeback, likely due to the recent durability updates. Rather than an AP burst damage focus, this build throws it back to her roots as a hybrid damage bruiser. Shyvana naturally has some high defensive stats, and the universal buffs she partook in have made her a bit better than before. That said, let's run through the build. For runes, take Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Second Wind, Overgrowth, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and a defensive rune. Her items are Divine Sunderer, Defensive Boots, Blade of the Ruined King, Death Stance, Nashor's Tooth, and Gargoyle Stoneplate. The combination of defensive items as well as aggressive attack speed items makes her a threat against both tanky and squishy enemies. Divine Sunderer is particularly powerful on Shyvana as she deals a sizable amount of both physical and magic damage. With Sunderer providing armor and magic penetration, you receive a massive boost in damage as well as some extra tankiness to work with. One final note is that a lot of players like to run Ghost on her. Your ultimate is your way of getting out of danger, and its cooldown isn't very long, so you shouldn't need flash. That's it for top lane builds, so we'll put them up on the screen for all of you. Make sure to take note of them, but before we move on to the jungle, I want to shout out our coaches at ProGuides.com. Those guys are putting in work. More and more changes are expected to come, and if you ever feel like you're falling behind on the meta, they can help you get that edge you need to win your games. Moving on to the jungle, we'll begin with a build for Khazix. Assassins have naturally ended up weaker following the last patch. This was to be expected, and thus we're seeing more and more players adopt bruiser builds instead. In Khazix's case, he deals some insane damage even without lethality because of his high damage ratio on his Q. That way, he's able to contribute heavily in fights even if he's lacking the one-shot potential we're used to. While he might not 100-0 an enemy with this build, he can still take out a huge chunk of a carry's health, reposition, and look for a second chance to land the killing blow. For this setup, you'll run the following runes: Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Magical Footwear, Cosmic Insight, Double Adaptive Force, and Armor. For his items, build Gore Drinker, Defensive Boots, Death Stance, Maw of Malmortius, Black Cleaver, and Guardian Angel. Before moving forward, let me ask our question of the day. Are you enjoying the game more now that burst damage is a bit weaker? I personally am. There's always times where I find myself getting caught out and I think, oh, I was just out of position by the tiniest of error, and then I'm instantly dead, and now I can survive, so my KDA has greatly improved. But that's from me. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below, and let's continue the video. In a similar fashion, players have adopted a new build for Nocturne as well. Rather than raw damage, however, it focuses on combining attack speed, on-hit damage, and survivability to back it all up. For his runes, take Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, Last Stand, Eyeball Collection, Ultimate Hunter, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor. For items, make sure to build Frostfire Gauntlet, Defensive Boots, Blade of the Ruined King, Death Stance, Wit's End, and Guardian Angel. Frostfire Gauntlet's active slow makes it easier for Nocturne to stick on his foes and beat him with consecutive basic attacks. Its passive burn damage does add up, and the extra tankiness makes him even harder to deal with. So with those fake assassin builds in the jungle finished, we'll put them up on the screen again for you to take another look. Now, let's run through the mid lane. For mid lane builds, we'll start with an odd one we've seen Corki players running. It's a hybrid build that dishes out some high AoE damage without sacrificing any of the burst damage we know Corki for. First, we'll run through the runes. It's a standard setup taking Hail of Blades, Taste of Blood, Ghost Poro, Relentless Hunter, Biscuit Delivery, Time Warp Tonic, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and a defensive rune. For your items, you're taking Trinity Force, Sorcerer's Shoes, Man Immune, Ravenous Hydra, Shadow Flame, and Rabadon's Death Cap. Ravenous Hydra does sound ridiculous, but it is particularly great for team fighting as well as wave clear. Since it adds splash damage to abilities as well, there are gonna be times where you'll be able to absolutely destroy clumped up enemies. Since you can hit multiple foes with Corki's abilities, you're able to deal the ability damage plus the splash damage to each target hit when they're adjacent to each other. This makes Corki an absolute menace, especially when fighting over epic monsters or in the jungle chokes. Then, we have the additions of Shadow Flame and Death Cap, adding a sizable amount of burst and poke damage. The second mid lane build we have is for Galio. Roaming has been and will likely always be one of the most impactful ways to carry games. Equipped with an absurd amount of crowd control, Galio's ganks are some of the deadliest in the game. With both his ultimate and summoner teleport, he can be anywhere at any time in the later stages of the game. Before talking about him some more, let me first give you the build we're covering. For runes, take Predator, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, Second Wind, Unflinching, Double Adaptive Force, and a defensive rune of choice. For the items, build Frostfire Gauntlet, Defensive Boots, Demonic Embrace, Zonya's Hourglass, Gargoyle Stoneplate, and Rabadon's Death Cap. With these items, Galio can act as both a frontliner and diver for his team. His damage is far too high for enemies to ignore him, but Frostfire Gauntlet as well as Stoneplate give him enough resistances to lead the charge for his teammates. And whenever you're near death, you can pop Zonya's to stall just a little bit longer. That wraps up the mid lane builds. Take a look as we put them on the screen once again, and let's move on to the bot lane builds next. In case you've been out of the loop, Kog'Maw has been absolutely destroying the competition. Ever since the durability changes, Kog'Maw has shown signs of life and started seeing considerably better results than before. While the durability changes might have felt lackluster, they helped him in two different ways. The first being that it's much easier for him to survive and scale up. The second is that since enemies are tankier than before, his percentage health damage is even more valuable than ever. That said, here's the build most players are abusing on him. For runes, take Lethal Tempo, Presence of Mind, Legend Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Overgrowth, Second Wind, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and a defensive rune. His items are Ginsu's Rageblade, Berserker's Greaves, Blade of the Ruined King, Riftmaker, Rapid Fire Cannon, and Titanic Hydra. The added Omnivamp and tankiness from Riftmaker make it significantly harder to take down Kog'Maw if enemies are able to reach him. At the same time, it provides an impressive damage boost through AP and its passive, plus the true damage conversion also allows Kog'Maw to deal all three sources of damage at the same time. Next, we have a build for support Nidalee. The idea that this is even here is surprising, but Nidalee's roams and burst damage are enough for her to threaten enemies, and so landing a spear leads to a terrifying amount of follow-up damage. With Spell Thieves, Nidalee is also able to easily poke at enemies for an early income boost. For runes, take Grasp of the Undying, Demolish, Second Wind, Unflinching, Nimbus Cloak, Water Walking, Attack Speed, and double defensive runes. Grasp of the Undying adds a significant amount of poke in the early lane, and the sustain also makes her a bit tankier than enemies would normally anticipate. Items are Spell Thief's Edge, Everfrost, Ionian Boots of Lucidity, Zonya's Hourglass, Redemption, and Morellonomicon. You can swap the order of Morello and Redemption based on what your team needs at that stage in the game. Again, even though this is support Nidalee, she still deals solid damage as a result of this low economy build. And finally, we'll conclude the video with a duo. For our featured combo this patch, we have Jungle Diana with Yasuo Bot. Both of these picks are already strong on their own, but paired together, they're team fighting gods. Diana's ultimate provides an insanely good setup for Yasuo to follow up with. Whether you're able to catch enemies clumping or bait them in by pushing for objectives, the wombo potential is absurd. It's not an exaggeration at all to say that these two can 2v5 a team fight with the right setup. That said, for Diana's build, take these runes: Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, Last Stand, Magical Footwear, Cosmic Insight, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor. For her items, build Nashor's Tooth, Stork Shoes, Sunfire Aegis, Demonic Embrace, Zonya's Hourglass, and Rabadon's Death Cap. Sunfire Aegis provides a solid boost in ability haste and tenacity, while also providing enough tankiness to ensure Diana doesn't get blown up the moment she jumps in. For Yasuo's build, his runes are Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, Last Stand, Second Wind, Overgrowth, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and a defensive rune. His items haven't changed, so as long as you include Berserker Greaves, Immortal Shieldbow, and Infinity Edge, with the rest of the build being defensive situational items like Death, Stance, Wit's End, or GA, you should be good to go. That covers our bottom lane, so make sure to take another look at the screen for a recap of those builds. That concludes our Korean builds for patch 12.11. I hope you all enjoyed it. As always, please share your thoughts or feedback in the comments below, and also expand the description if you'd like to join our Discord community. We'd love to have you there, and you'll also be the first to learn about future giveaways for prizes like free coaching and RP. Take care everyone, good luck on the Rift, and may the LP gods smile down upon you.